All right, everybody. Hello. Welcome into Bills Weekly here on FingerLakes1.com. I'm Paul Russo. Kyle Evans is here with me. We'll be recapping the Week 1 Monday Night Football loss for the Buffalo Bills. Also take a look at the Week 2 matchup where the Las Vegas Raiders come to Highmark Stadium on Sunday afternoon, and a couple other major headlines to discuss as well. But first, I want to take some time to thank today's sponsor of the podcast, Lincoln Hill Farms. Coming out to Lincoln Hill Farms on this Saturday, September 16th from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. for Oktoberfest on the farm. Enjoy German-style food, beer, live music, a Steinhoist contest, and plenty of other fun fare. Get more information and tickets online at LincolnHillFarms.com. So, Kyle, rough one for the Bills last night on Monday night, which we'll get to as well. But Week 1 officially, not just for the Bills, but the NFL in the book. Any quick thoughts on the week overall in general before we get to the Bills?
I would say it was a wild week. A lot of teams that I think people thought would win didn't. A lot of things happened injury-wise, and I think last night's game kind of just capped off the wild week with the way last night's game went. I never expected it to end the way it did last night, and I don't think anyone did. I'm not just talking about the punt return, just like going to overtime, just everything that went on with the injuries, and it's just, I think it was one of the more wild week ones or weeks in the NFL in a while.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point right there, right? And we'll touch obviously on all that, but yeah, I mean, from everything from, for example, like Cincinnati, who, I mean, admittedly, I did pick Cleveland, not to toot my own horn, but I didn't expect like that. You know what I mean? Even the drubbing on Sunday night also at MetLife from the Cowboys to the Giants. So just a craziness of Week 1. We'll get to recapping the Bills and Jets here in a minute, but first, do want to touch on a couple headlines involving the Bills. We begin, unfortunately, with the somber news of former wide receiver Mike Williams passed away this morning at the age of 36. This is per his agent, Hadley Engelhard. There was a lot of, I don't want to say confusion, but just different news from, I guess, different people close to him involving him. He was in an ICU at a local hospital in Tampa following a workplace accident at a construction site. Again, this portion of it, I've heard different sources. I've heard there was a piece of metal that fell on him he was working with electrical equipment, but nonetheless, it left him partially paralyzed. And he was taken off a ventilator last Thursday. Also, a bit of a local tie as well. Local kid from Buffalo, played for the Bills. Also was a Syracuse wide receiver from 2006 to 2009. Dark years in Syracuse as well there. Kyle, initial, I guess, kind of thoughts regarding this, because, like I said, it was a confusing, really honestly, few days, kind of unfortunately involving Mike and his untimely passing at this point.
Yeah, it was like a kind of an odd story to follow because there was, like you said, so many mixed reports. But yeah, 36 years old, sad and tragic incident, that you would never expect to happen. And then I heard that, was it 3-4 days ago he got off life support, and I was like, oh man, he's good at fighting this. He might have a chance. And then this morning I wake up and hear the news, and it's sad. I remember his year in Buffalo. I think it was 2014, and caught a couple touchdowns. I liked him. I know he had some trouble on the field and with different teams and stuff. And wasn't he suspended a year at Syracuse? He didn't play that 1 year.
Yeah, he quit the 2009 season. He was involved in an accident with some teammates, a car accident with some teammates. He left the team and quit the team in November of that season.
Yeah, so he's kind of had a wild path, but when healthy and when not, having off the field stuff, I thought he was a pretty good receiver.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously, thoughts and prayers are with him and his family, close to him as well. The other major piece of headline news here involving the Bills involves team owner Terry Pegula, named this morning in the Jim Trotter lawsuit against the NFL alongside Cowboys owner Jerry Jones. This is, to me anyway, and obviously if you want to really dig into, I guess, the business side of Terry Pegula, his other interests, business-wise, you can certainly maybe find some stuff. But sports-wise, this is his first controversy kind of any sort here. Jim Trotter, for those who don't know, suing the NFL for more or less an unjust firing. Um, had been with the NFL Network and everything like that. So um, it caught me off guard because I didn't even know about it, Kyle, until you told me here, honestly, within pretty much the past hour or so. Um, so what is it that you kind of know on this so far, and what are the stuff that you've seen regarding it?
Yeah, it caught me off guard. I don't think we expected this kind of news. Not even or maybe just over 12 hours after their rough loss last night. Um, of course, Pagulas put out a statement, declining the allegations. Obviously, this is going to be a longer investigation. We won't really know a whole lot. But I noticed that Jerry Jones hasn't put out a statement,
Hmm.
and I have an article pulled up here from 2017 from the Associated Press. Uh, Jerry Jones has had a history of this. He apologized for racial remarks in a video back in 2017.
Yeah.
So I don't know. This is like an ongoing story, ongoing investigation. Hopefully, it's not true, especially for the Bills side of things. Of course, being a fan and talking about this team here. Um, but yeah, I don't really have much more on it. Just hopefully, it's not true.
Yeah, I mean, this obviously puts, at the moment, the team not in a tough spot. Or really, I guess, even to be fair, Terry as well. Obviously, these things need to play out. Where it gets interesting, obviously, is like you said, Kyle. If anything kind of actually, uh, or if anything is actually proven in the court here through the lawsuit, then we could be dealing with, I wouldn't say maybe to the level of, say, like the Clippers with Donald Sterling, for example, but we're dealing with more than likely the Bills probably having to go back on the market.
And the thing is, the Bills they played just one game, and now they're already possibly going to have a distraction after everything they went through last year. This is the last thing they need. Like I said, hopefully this is not true and things just clear up quickly. But yeah, not a good story to start a Tuesday after a rough loss.
Certainly, yeah. All right, let's get to that game and recap and discuss some things from it. Week 1, Monday Night Football, Bills 16, Jets 22, a loss for Buffalo in overtime. Quick hitting thoughts here before we can kind of jump into some different stuff. I want to give some kudos here, and it's funny kind of talking with, I guess, different people here immediately kind of following the game. I think I'm the only one with I wouldn't even say full-fledged positive spin on the game for the Bills, but I thought defensively speaking, I thought they did predominantly all right. Obviously, some certain stuff you can work on, everything like that, but it's week 1. I don't know if week 1's such a crapshoot anyway, to a degree, right? You don't know what you fully got or anything like that. I thought defensively, right? Defensively, they only really gave up 16 points, right? Obviously, the punt return to win in overtime, that's not so much on the defense as it is obviously special teams. So it's kind of hard to kind of gauge within that space, really, the defense per se. Offensively, I think is where there's obviously going to need some work to be done still, right? And we'll jump in more on that side of things here in a second when we discuss a little bit more. But what were the initial thoughts for you, Kyle, on the game last night?
Yeah, I thought you said it well on the defensive side of things. Obviously Aaron Rodgers leaves 5 plays into the game, or 4 plays, or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And Zach Wilson, he hasn't had much success in this league, so you know I don't think they gave up a ton considering that Zach Wilson played for basically the entire game, and then Breece Hall had 127 rushing yards.
Yeah.
But again, they scored just 16 points, so fine, give up those rushing yards, but limit their touchdowns and in the red zone. Just hold them to field goals, and that's basically what they did when they did get down there. And honestly, what was it? 1 or 2 of Josh Allen's turnovers basically set the Jets up on their end. So if Josh Allen didn't turn the ball over, this Jets team probably wouldn't have even scored 16 points. There was times where they weren't even moving the ball up the field. Just incomplete missed throws by Zach Wilson. So yeah, I thought the defense played well. I do think they still need to work on stopping the run. It's been a big issue for years now. But again, they didn't let them in the end zone, so I guess you can't really complain. But for offensively, yeah, I think there's a little bit of a problem with Josh Allen, not as their quarterback of the future, but just right now what he's doing. Since the second half of last year, he's making these same mistakes, and it's kind of looking like his rookie year where He's just not reading defense as well, making bad decisions, throwing into double coverage, forcing the ball down the field. One glaring play that sticks out to me is I think it was a 3rd and 11 play. I think on the overthrow to Gabe Davis when he got picked off in the end zone. He had room to run for the first down.
Right.
And instead of just taking the first down with his legs, he tries to force it downfield. And it just seems like mentally he's not in a good place right now. And the rhythm, even though the Jets have a great defense, I'll give him that. It just seems like he just wasn't the Josh Allen that we know he can be. And it's frustrating because they should have won that game.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up that play because we'll start here. Allen, 29 for 41, 236 yards, a touchdown, 3 interceptions, rushed for 36 yards. Did have a fumble and lost one, or had 2 fumbles and lost one. But you bring up that play, and that's something I think we can discuss a little bit here. You mentioned, right, there's a pattern at this point. You can go back to last year with Josh Allen. And it's funny you mentioned that play because that's kind of the one that sticks out, and that was very early on in the game, still all things considered, their second drive. And, I don't necessarily know if he would have had that lane for the first down fully all the way, but the fact of the matter is I do worry at this point, if there's any true worry to come out of this, right? I do worry at this point, is this the Josh Allen that you're just are kind of with at this point? Eventually, that IQ, the quarterback IQ stuff has to click. And I just don't know if it's fully kind of going on with him, right? He still is clearly struggling when he does take off with just getting down. There's nothing wrong with it, right? Like, you need to live to see another play sometimes, right? And I don't want to make it sound like that next hit he's he's going to get knocked out, but you just don't know. Like he got sandwiched a few different times last night, and so to me, like the long pass, everything within that play, it's like is there gonna click at this point, right? And if not, how do you kind of adjust for it? Because to me, right, he's still like one of those top tier quarterbacks in the league, right? But can you trust him to make some of these plays that frankly, your Kirk Cousins might just make, where it's like he's going to take the safe play and live to see the other play? Like, I don't know. And it puts the Bills season more so, I think, at a crossroads than even we might have been thinking about anyway last week, right? Where, I don't think you go into next year with a completely new quarterback or anything like that, right? But, like, I think you have to, and again, week 1, right? Let's take a breather. But, like, I think it's fair to maybe kind of think about how do you build this team to make and capitalize on the positives or the pluses of Josh Allen rather than the negatives.
Yeah, and we know he's capable of, being an elite quarterback in this league. I mean, we saw him in that playoff game in Kansas City. We saw him against New England when they won a perfect 5 for 5 on drives against a Patriots defense that obviously has given him trouble so much over the years with Bill Belichick as a head coach, of course. But then you see a game like this, it's amazing how good he can look on the top tier quarterback scale, and then how bad he can look. Like, to be honest, yesterday his performance was probably one of the worst among quarterbacks over the weekend, except Joe Burrow. But amazingly, Joe Burrow never turned the ball over. As bad as his passing numbers were and everything in the rain, he never turned the ball over. He still took care of the football, even though he struggled very bad.
Right.
So, yeah, they do. I mean, I guess I'll give him a break, like you said, because it's week 1, and they faced a really good defense. But there was opportunities in this game where, regardless of how good that defense was, the Bills should have had more success. And if Allen just took the little throws or just ran a little bit more instead of forcing things, this game would have flipped completely different.
Yeah.
And remember, they were up 13-3 at halftime.
Yeah, I was about to say, I mean, the fact of the matter is, after the Aaron Rodgers injury occurs, right, early on, as a team, you have to, I think, collectively recognize, right, like, it's right there in front of us. And they had it right there in front of them for, I mean, whatever you want to call it, 50% of the game at minimum, right? And couldn't, frankly, capitalize. Moving on, I was intrigued, personally, to kind of see how this first game would play out with the receiving core. Stephon Diggs led the way with 10 receptions and 102 yards with a touchdown. After that, yardage-wise, second place was Gabe Davis with 32 yards, but he only had 2 receptions. Whereas receptions-wise, number 2 was tied between rookie Dalton Kincaid, tight end, and running back James Cook. Um, it was I wouldn't say staggering to me. That's probably the wrong word, but it did intrigue me kind of seeing the distribution of this game. And obviously, it was very Diggs heavy collectively, right? Um, Kyle, I'll give credit to you. Your one prop bet that you had for yesterday was spot on.
Hit in the first
Diggs.
half.
Yeah, so I'll have to admit defeat on that one, right? Hand up. But what did you make of the distribution of the ball? Because to me, it was interesting. I don't, like I said, I don't think it's a bad thing. It did catch me off guard though that there was such a drop off from first to second in terms of receptions, though.
Yeah, I thought the targets would be spread out more. You look at Gabe Davis; he had 4 targets, and what is he basically considered right now? Your number 2 receiver. So yeah, I agree. I don't think they spread the ball out good enough, and there was times where they ran the ball, and I didn't like some of the play calls. For example, I don't know if you were watching right away in the first minute of the game. They start with the ball. They get 2 quick completions, the second of which was on a nice slant to Diggs, and then they run twice. They face a 3rd and 5. Allen throws it behind Diggs, and boom, they're punting.
Yeah.
They had success right away with quick throws to the outside and then the slant, and then they go run. It's like when things are clicking with the passing game, they just switch it up and run. Like they want to establish the run regardless of the pass is working. And I thought James Cook was pretty decent. His biggest run was 13 yards. I don't think it was that bad, but he definitely could have been better. But yeah, just no rhythm to this offense. It literally was just like the second half of last year, where a bunch of 3-and-outs, no rhythm, Allen's turning the ball over. And I don't know if you've seen this stat, but since 2018, Josh Allen has turned the ball over 84 times,
A lot.
which leads the NFL, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the only quarterback in NFL history to start his career 0-5 in overtime. He's never won an overtime game. And, of course, it's just a bad spot right now, I think, for this team. Like, fan-wise, I mean, you come in today, there's, like, not a lot of confidence. This was, like, a huge loss to start off the year. Everyone that came in with so high expectations, even for this game. This game didn't live up to the way it was talked about because Rodgers left early. Allen turned the ball over a career-high 4 times, or career-tying 4 times, and I don't know. It's just I got an odd feeling as a fan. Like, you just don't know what to expect now with how bad Allen looked.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm happy you bring up James Cook, right, because he led the team in rushing, right, but 12 carries, 46 yards, not, again, you want to talk about getting a rhythm. I wouldn't say they're all over the place kind of rushing-wise, but if you want to do it from, like, what I like looking at from the efficiency standpoint, it wasn't great. And it kind of seemed like, they couldn't find the rhythm. Now I get it. Look, that Jets defense very good against the run, especially, right? But
running in right to Quinnen Williams.
Right, but you have to wonder, and it's again week 1. Probably should pump the brakes a little bit, but Ken Dorsey's play calling.
Yeah, it was questioned last year.
Bad, right? I mean, especially like the second half, like you bring up Kyle, right? At this point, if it's 1 or 2 games as an isolated deal, right? It's whatever. But collectively here, it's a pattern, to say the least, right?
And how about the clock management late? I don't know if you're watching when they tied the game late, but yes, they got into field goal range for the 50-yard game-tying field goal, but there was like some plays on that drive where it's like they weren't hustling the line. They had no timeouts left,
Right.
and I just felt like they could have moved up closer to make the kick a little easier, or maybe take a shot to the middle of the field and then inch closer. But
It did feel, admittedly, like a lot of the plays were not designed to, frankly, clock manage properly. I mean, the one reception by, I believe it was Diggs, was just over the middle. And I think at that point they still had the one timeout left. But in that situation, like, you shouldn't really be gunning for the middle as your number 1. You have to be going sideline and planning, right, to get out of bounds. And it's just one of those things where it's like, like I don't know. And like I said, it puts this team at a crossroads for really be fair to the future, but especially this year, like what should the expectation be? You know what I mean? Like I don't know if you're gonna, it's pretty apparent, struggle through week one with this Jets team that, frankly, like you said, Kyle, what, 5 plays into the game, they lose their biggest acquisition in, sheesh, I don't know, better part of a decade and a half almost, since they brought in Brett Favre, funnily enough, that, look, like Robert Saleh looked like he saw a ghost the first half of the game because of just how, like, it looked like everything was just zapped out of that team. And more or less, you let them off the hook. You let them win a game in overtime, nonetheless, too, where it's like they more or less stopped you on offense pretty easily in overtime. And, the darling of Hard Knocks and Xavier Gibson delivers a knockout punch on a punt return. It's crazy.
Yeah, and how about the Bills' first possession in that overtime?
Yeah.
You come right out and you get a false start on Spencer Brown, so puts you, back 5 yards. And then on 2nd and 15, you're running up the middle at Quinnen Williams.
I was going to say that play was wild.
Yeah, you run up the middle.
Play call.
It's like, what are you doing, Ken Dorsey? It's in overtime. There's 9 minutes left. You had the ball. You won the toss. And on 2nd and 15, you run the ball.
Yeah.
It's clear that since Brian Dable has left, the offense, you can look at the numbers, hasn't been close to what it was. It just seemed like with Dable as a play caller, everything was more free and easy, and there was rhythm, and he understood Josh Allen's strengths, and it just seemed like Brian Dable set them up so successfully for the most part, and their offense just was more dangerous.
Yeah.
Now you look at them, and it's like the 3-and-outs with this kind of offense, just unbelievable.
Yeah. Let's talk about defense here again for a quick minute. Give some shout outs to some players. Who would have thought that Terrell Bernard was going to be your leading tackler on the day? I certainly would not have guessed it, but hey, 11 total tackles for the guy, 4 of which were solo. Matt Milano, do want to talk about him though for a quick second. He had 8 tackles, interception, but kind of came out after the game. He ended up in the X-ray room. I haven't myself really seen anything else beyond that. I don't know, Kyle, did you see anything else regarding that? I know that was kind of a late stage post-game kind of news drop that I saw with that.
Yeah, I didn't see anything on Milano, but I saw that Mitch Morse was in the X-ray room.
Oh, that's who. Apologies, yeah.
Yeah, it said like a finger injury, but I guess it seems like he's fine. So yeah, I think the Bills came out of this game pretty healthy. Micah Hyde did leave the game late with cramping.
It was humid though, like it was bad.
Yeah, I really thought the defense played well. As you mentioned, Milano. I don't know if you saw the one play where he just flew through the middle and tackled Delvin Cook for a loss of like 4 or 5 yards. And like I said in our first show, with no Tremaine Edmonds now, he's like a big-time player for this team. If he doesn't perform, this team is in trouble. Mm-hmm. And him and Terrell Bernard, for him being his first start, I thought they both worked really well together. Again, I thought there was also missed tackles, and they should have stopped Breece Hall and limited Delvin Cook a little more as well. But I was actually happy with the way the defense looked.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with 100%. That was something like I said, week one, who knows? But, I was admittedly worried a little bit despite McDermott's background, right? Taking on the play calling responsibilities for defense, right? In addition to the head coaching stuff. But looked like he kind of, frankly, fell into what made him a head coach for the Bills in the first place. Just collectively good play calling and really handling business.
Yeah, and shout out to Leonard Floyd. He had a sack on Rodgers before he left the game and finished with another half a sack later in the game. First game with the Bills, I thought he played well. And I think it's going to be a good addition to this defensive line.
Yeah, I'll tie a bow on week one with this. Shout out to special teams overall. Tyler Bass, 3 for 3, long of 50, being that game winner, the doink off the upright and through 1 for 1 extra points. That's kind of the deal, though, with him. I mean, he's very good. I don't think he probably gets a lot of the credit he probably deserves collectively throughout the league at this point. But frankly, for an offense that was struggling, the guy came in and was able to get some points up on the board for the Bills.
Yeah.
And like like I said, doinked it off the upright, but nerves of steel in a very tight moment, obviously, at the end of regulation.
Yeah, he's not Justin Tucker, but I agree with you. Even what you said in the first show, for me, he's pretty reliable. Like I'm pretty confident when he goes out there in a big situation, even if it's like 50 yards out, like it was. It just seems like he doesn't miss very often, and when he does, it's usually because of weather. So yeah, I like Tyler Bass. It was a little scary, but
Yeah.
thankfully it went in.
He had more than enough toe on that, right? I mean, it kicked off of. Now, mind you, there was very little wind at that point, so the flag on the upright was down on the pole itself. But I mean, you gotta put some leg and distance on that to be able to hit it where the flag is. And so, if that's an indication possibly of, if you're in a really tough spot and there's little to no wind, or you're in obviously a dome situation for Tyler Bass, like that's a big spot to potentially be in.
I thought we were gonna have a broadcast jinx though. Right before they showed him kicking in pregame from 60 yards and making it right down the middle, and I was like, oh no, watch this be a broadcast jinx.
Right.
Even though I don't really believe in those, but I mean,
It's fair, though.
people do, and it does happen. You show a graphic and the guy misses or gets picked off or whatever they're showing on the screen. So yeah, that was an intense moment.
Right. All right, let's transition over here and discuss week 2 for the Bills, hosting Las Vegas Raiders at home. Kickoff at 1 p.m. Television-wise on CBS. The Raiders won week 1. They're over the Broncos 17-16. They're solely in possession of first place in the AFC West through week 1. How about that? Jimmy Garoppolo, under center, first year with the Raiders, went 2 for 26, 200 yards, 2 TDs, and an interception. Their leading rusher through week 1, surprise, is Josh Jacobs, but similar to James Cook, 19 carries for 48 yards for Jacobs. Jacoby Myers, currently the leading receiver for the Raiders, 9 receptions, 81 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Bills currently sitting as a 9-point favorite. Over-under sitting at 47. Current forecast as it sits right now, high of 64 degrees on Sunday and cloudy in Orchard Park. So, this is a Raiders team that, not to be very memeable with them, right, but they are the Raiders. But through week 1, I do have some mild expectations for them on the year. I think they're a little bit better than meets the eye, but that being said, who knows through whatever we might see with them. But what stands out to you, I guess, initially here as we look at this matchup, Kyle?
Yeah, Jimmy Garoppolo certainly has had his struggles in this league, but then he's also looked solid. Like he's done enough to help teams win games. So I think it's honestly going to come down to him and how the Bills defense plays against them. I don't think the Bills will have trouble scoring as much as they did against the Jets. But again, you can't have Josh Allen going out there turning the ball over 4 times. Yeah, so I think the Raiders have a good receiving core as well. It's not great, but Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfrow, Jacoby Myers, and then Austin Hooper as a tight end. It's not terrible. And then Josh Jacobs as the running back. If the Bills don't work on stopping the run, Josh Jacobs could have a big day. So yeah, I don't really know what to expect in terms of like a game score, but I think the Bills should win this game.
Yeah, if there's ever, I guess, a opponent to face for the Bills on offense, anyway, offensively for the Bills, rather, after a struggle in week 1, it would be this Raiders defense. Collectively not great. They do have pieces, mainly, Max Crosby up on the front end of things, who will certainly wreak chaos and cause some chaos there. But to me, anyway, this is a really good get-right game for the Bills, on offense especially. And, to be fair, you bring up a good point, Kyle. Probably defensively, too. This is a nice prove-it game in a sense, right? Back up what you did against the Jets, against the Raiders offense that I'd say at worst is probably league pedestrian in nature. It does, maybe, like I said, week 1 tough, but it does catch me off guard that, say, Jacoby Myers is their leading receiver right now, and with Jacobs, it doesn't surprise me that he's the leading rusher, but 19 carries for 48 yards against a Denver defense that is all right, but doesn't do a ton for me. Like, that certainly, I would say, raise some eyebrows and give me, I'd say, some hope on defense that, like, we can carry over what we did against the Jets to to be fair, if Rodgers was probably healthy through the whole game, a very comparable offense to what you saw in week one.
Yeah, I agree. It's a get right game for basically both sides. Um, Jimmy Garoppolo, again, he's not great. He's I don't even know
Serviceable.
I don't even know what yeah, I don't really have a word for him, but he's not terrible, but he's not great. He's like a mediocre, middle of the road type quarterback.
I have the right term. Joe Flacco.
So yeah, I think this Bills defense should have no problem stopping the pass. But let's see if they can stop the run. I think that's the big question.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the big thing here. No knock on Brees Hall, no knock on Dalvin Cook, right? But Josh Jacobs was the number one rusher in the league last year for a reason. There's a reason why collectively he's very highly regarded throughout the league, whether it's actually on the field stuff to fantasy purposes, right? I mean, this is a guy who, look, he shouldn't be only having 48 yards in a game on 19 carries, to put it bluntly. I would imagine if the Bills even held him to the same stat line, they would probably be very thrilled come Monday when we're back talking about them, Kyle. The fact of the matter is, though, I think even then, like I do struggle to see him having maybe less than 60 in essence, right? And I know that's probably a low-end mark, too, for Jacobs, but, like, if he comes out there somewhere in that range, if you're the Bills, I'd imagine you have to be really thrilled with that, though.
Yeah, I totally agree. The thing too with the Bills though is it seems like when they're giving up these rushing yards to these running backs, usually the like for example Brees Hall 127 last night. Most of those yards were on some big gains. Like what was the one like 40 plus yard
Yes.
gain?
Yeah.
So it seems like when they have breakdowns, like they really pay for it. Like they give up long runs, and that's kind of what raises these running back stats up. And they need to stop doing that. They need to tackle. I thought in the first quarter they struggled tackling. They had Leonard Floyd had a missed tackle, Jordan Poyer had a missed tackle. I think it all comes down to tackling, and that's also another issue that they had last year. On the defensive side, they missed tackles too much.
Yeah. I think, and I don't think it's necessarily a boom or bust defense in that sense, but you are correct. McDermott, I mean, I remember even in Carolina, right? McDermott's defenses would have a lot of activity in the box, but, you know, especially on runs, stuff like that did tend to happen a little bit from time to time because you just kind of compensate for trying to stop them up front that you kind of forget out behind. And, yeah, I mean, the one Hall run does stick out because personally I thought he was gone. I did think he was gone. I thought, I mean, and
Didn't Garrett Wilson put his hands
well,
up?
I was about to say, and that's where it comes down to, right? Is I think if Wilson had the wherewithal to at least attempt to block, who was back there? Was it Poyer? I think, or
Yeah, I can't
I
remember.
can't remember if it was Poyer or Hyde, whoever was back there. We're probably talking about, I mean, probably not even this foul score being the foul score that it is, right? But yeah, the fact of the matter is, if Garrett Wilson just attempted to block, it's probably a different story to that end. I guess at this point, I know you said you didn't, Kyle, but I think we have to do our prediction time here. If you want, I'll go first, so that way you can prepare a little bit. I do think the Bills get a victory here, but the 9 points, if you're going from that angle, it's a lot to cover in my mind, just at least at the moment. But I think the fact of the matter is, the Bills are going to win by, I guess, technically a possession. I think the Bills win 27-21. I think, like I said, I think offensively this is a very good bounce back week collectively, and maybe it's not safe from Diggs, right? Diggs had a phenomenal week one, right? But for Josh Allen, right, it's a get right week. Maybe you can get out there with 2 touchdowns and none to 1 interception type thing, right? It's tough when. I didn't realize this actually until watching Thursday Night Football last week. But Jared Goff had the best ratio last year in the NFL at more or less 4 touchdowns every 1 interception, right? And think about that. If that's what the league average is by Jared Goff, and I don't mean to disparage Jared Goff, that means in theory, if you're a really good quarterback, you're still throwing an interception a game. Kind of in theory. So I think, say he has a similar completion to attempt range where it's like 29 to 40, 41 type thing, right? but maybe you boost up the yardage a little bit. You get above that 250 mark. You have a couple touchdowns, maybe an interception. You're a bit more careful with the ball when you're running and stuff like that. I think, we come into next week having a discussion about, carrying that type of performance over to week 3 and for the rest of the season. Whereas if he comes out and looks similar, which I don't think is the case, but it could happen, I think we're having a completely different discussion about maybe the season as a whole out of week 2. But like I said, I think it's a really good spot for the Bills this week. Do I think they cover? No. I guess technically I would also be slightly on the over as well here on that over 47, on the over under being 47 as it stands right now. So I'm saying 27-21 Bills victory week 2 over the Raiders.
I'm going to say 30-21.
Okay.
I do think the Bills' offense will be better. I think Allen will not turn the ball over as much. I just don't think the Raiders' defense is that good. So that's why I see them putting up 30. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have. I probably will go the over on Josh Allen's touchdowns in this game. I know we're going to save that for another show. But he cost me last night. He couldn't get 2.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll say 30-21 Bills win, and it's a much better Monday next week.
Sure, definitely. So, Kyle, it's perfect that you mentioned Monday next week. So, like I mentioned, if you listened to last week's episode, we'll be back Monday next week following the Bills game because, well, we do it the day after. No sense in talking about the Bills on a Monday if they're on Monday Night Football. Kind of defeats the purpose a little bit to that end. So, really appreciate everybody for listening and watching. You can find Bills Weekly here on FingerLeaks1.com, FingerLeaks1.com YouTube channel, as well as all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Amazon Music. So for Kyle Evans, I'm Paul Russo. Thanks again, everybody. We'll be back next Monday, and let's go Buffalo.